Hello, everyone. Welcome. Welcome to another SYB webinar. Today's topic is very timely as more of us than ever are working from home. Not only that, but our kids are learning from home. This means we have even more reliance on electronics than ever before. We get several questions every day from people asking how to stay safer while staying connected. So today, we're going to bring you the best tips that you can put into place right away to make your home work environment as healthy as possible. So, very quick overview of what we're going to cover today. First, I'll do very brief introductions, both of me and our expert speaker, Cathy, so you know who we are. Then we'll spend about 30 minutes on the main content. Then I have a special, as promised in the emails, I have a special giveaway offer for all of you, and followed by question and answer. So we'll stay on for quite a while, trying to get to as many questions as possible. I know some of you submitted them in advance as well. So, but you can also, so we'll be going into the questions that you asked in advance. But you can also, if you scroll down on this page, you'll see and ask questions, and we'll get to those too, as many as we can. So very briefly about me, my name is R. Blank. I am the CEO of Shield Your Body. I formerly taught on the engineering faculty at the University of Southern California. Along with my father, Dr. Martin Blank, I am co-author of Overpowered, which is a book surveying what we know about EMF health effects. And this all follows a 20-year career in software engineering. Okay, enough about me, because none of you are here to see me today. I'm really excited to have the opportunity to help bring you today's topic, though. So many of us are spending more time at home these days, more than many of us ever imagined, for obvious reasons. Last month, Cathy delivered a fantastic webinar, our best attended webinar yet, about managing EMF in the bedroom. And if you missed that, I'll be sending you the link to watch it as soon as this webinar is done. So if you missed last month's webinar, you'll get the link to watch it right after this one's done. In the bedroom, we focus less on the bedroom because it's really important for a lot of reasons that Cathy covered in the webinar, especially the fact that we all spend so much time there. But increasingly, after all that's happened in 2020, we're all spending a lot of time at home in general, outside of the bedroom. We're working from home. We're homeschooling our kids. So this month, I asked Cathy if she would come back to cover EMF management, mitigation, and protection at home, but outside of the bedroom, with a particular focus on those of us working from home, even maybe in places and environments that were never designed for work in the first place. For those of you who don't know Cathy, I'm very happy to have the opportunity to introduce you to her. Cathy Cooke is a board-certified holistic nutritionist and a certified building biology environmental consultant and certified electromagnetic radiation specialist with the Building Biology Institute. She has a lot of certifications in a lot of relevant subject matter areas. In her practice as a building biologist, she assesses buildings for anything that may cause health problems. This includes indoor air quality, mold, chemical off-gassing, ventilation, combustible gas products, and of course, EMF exposure. Cathy combines holistic nutrition and building biology to address both the body and environment to help clients achieve optimal health. She is also a devoted advocate for EMF health issues as the founder of Idahoans for Safe Technology, an advocacy and awareness group for the safer use of modern day communications. So with that, let's please all welcome Cathy. Cathy?
Awesome. Thank you so much, R. Hello again to everyone. I'm just so happy to be here with this fabulous SYB community. We've got a chat going on over in it's the right hand for me. I'm just curious where everyone is from. If you guys want to type in the chat there where you're from, that would be exciting. We've got Bernhard from Toronto, awesome. Monica from Texas, Lisa Tucson, Chicago, the Netherlands, wow. Panama, yes. Duluth, cool. I've been looking at Duluth lately. This sounds like a An awesome place to live. Iowa, Vancouver, San Diego. Wow, awesome. Nova Scotia, holy smokes. Great, so exciting to have everybody here today. I'm really having such a wonderful time on these webinars, and you guys really ask some very, very good questions. So it's just really inspiring to me to see so many people being proactive about their health, especially with a topic like this, as it can be really overwhelming. So R briefly mentioned I'm a building biologist, and I just wanted to encourage you all, if you're not familiar with building biology, go back and watch our other webinars on the sleeping sanctuary. I took a few minutes to talk about the history and the mission of the Building Biology Institute, which is really fascinating if you want to learn more about it, or you can visit their website, of course, at the link provided here. They have a lot of really great resources for you. Okay, so let's jump right into our topic today, how to reduce your EMF exposure while you are working from home. The world has experienced a lot of changes in the last 8 months, as you are all aware. According to one Stanford economist, 42% of the US labor force is now working from home full time. And of course, a large percentage of our children are learning from home at least part-time. This means we need several computers, multiple internet connections, and we've got all of our devices at home. Most of us rely on cell phones and smartwatches to stay in touch as well. Add to that things like the printer, wireless keyboards and mouse, the blue light exposure from your screens, and you've got the potential for quite an extreme EMF working space. So, of course, you are all here to know what you can do to protect yourselves while staying connected. And thankfully, there are many easy steps you can take right away to dramatically reduce your EMF exposure and at the same time, improve your connectivity. If you put into place the tips I'm going to lay out for you today, you can actually have a much more efficient working environment than you do now. So what could be better than this? A healthier and a more efficient workspace. All it takes is a few simple steps that I'm going to outline for you today. So let's take a quick second to review the main EMFs. Many of you are probably already aware of these, but I like to do a quick review because it can be pretty confusing. So if you've watched our other webinars, then you know that the 4 main electromagnetic fields that we are concerned about are electric fields, magnetic fields, radio frequency, and dirty electricity. But also worth noting are the peripheral fields of static electricity and blue light. So each of these fields needs to be addressed. And anywhere that you find electricity, and especially electronics like computers, you will find some degree of all of these fields. So today we're going to identify the most likely items you have in your workspace and identify ways we can make them safer. Now, remember, we're talking about the home working environment, but most of this will apply to a standard office environment as well. So keep that in mind if you don't work from home, or maybe you work from home part-time and in an office part-time. Okay, so I have a screen here of the field sources. I just like to have this as a bit of a review here. If you want to take a second to take a screenshot of this slide, I'll give you a few moments to do so. But here's the basics. Electric fields come from electricity. Okay, that makes sense, right? So anywhere that there are wires running through your walls or power cords plugged into outlets or anything working via electricity, there will be an electric field. Magnetic fields come from things like power lines. They could be either overhead or buried. They also come from breaker panels, large appliances like refrigerators and ovens. They come from outlets and things with different speeds or motors like a blender, hair dryer, electric toothbrush, computer charger, toasters, things like that. Now, radio frequencies, of course, come from all of our wireless devices. So to make this easy, think of radio waves, right? So this is information that is going through the air. And the obvious sources of these are, of course, your cell phones, Wi-Fi, cell towers, fitness trackers, smart speakers, anything that uses Bluetooth, gaming systems, and things like that. So dirty electricity, or microsurge electrical pollution, as we call it, comes from things that alter the 50 or 60 hertz sine wave. The biggest offenders are CFL light bulbs, LED light bulbs, fluorescent lights, solar panels, computer chargers, any energy-saving appliance or device, and utility meters. And then the peripheral fields of static electricity come from synthetic materials and metal in your mattresses or furniture. And then, of course, blue light comes from any man-made source of light. So let's go through an office environment and give you some concrete examples. But actually, before we jump into that, I want to take a quick second to talk about testing. Though I'm going to give you some actionable steps that you can take immediately to reduce your exposure, it's still highly recommended that you know what the actual levels are of each field inside your home. So for this reason, I recommend that everybody has their own meter and that you test regularly, as things can often change. The 3 meters I have listed here are among my favorite for the accuracy and the relative price. The first one listed is the Gigahertz ME3030B. It's an excellent meter for testing both your electric and your magnetic fields. It's about $150, and for the price, you probably won't find one that's more accurate. The meter in the middle is the Safe and Sound Classic from Safe Living Technologies. It only tests radio frequency, but it's very accurate and it's really easy to use. If you don't want to worry about the numbers and what all that means, this gives you simple readings in slight, medium, high, and extreme, so it's really simple to use. But if you want to get a little bit more sophisticated with measuring radio frequency, then I recommend the Safe and Sound Pro on the right. It's nearly as accurate as my professional meters, and it's well worth the cost. It will give you the actual readings in microwatts per square meter, which is the measurements that building biologists use. So it's helpful so that you can keep a log and identify how the numbers change with different devices and over time. I sell all of these on my website, and I have a discount codes for all of these if you want to go check them out there. Of course, I also suggest a thorough assessment be completed by a certified building biologist, as there are some issues that will be beyond your ability to measure or to mitigate. If you're really serious about creating the healthiest home possible, an evaluation by an expert is really invaluable. And now that the holidays are coming up, gifting an assessment to your family or even for yourself is really one of the best gifts you can give. Alrighty, so let's get into the nitty-gritty here, and let's lighten it up a little bit. Who likes games? Anybody? I love games. So we're gonna play a little game here. So I want you to take a second to look at this picture. This represents a typical home office setup. So do you see any items in this picture that are an EMF concern? If so, how many do you see? So I'm going to give you a few seconds to write them down or tally them up. And when you think you know the answer, I want you to put it in the chat and tell me how many you can see. Oh, 9. We're getting answers already. 9, 8, 9, 7. Ooh. Laura says 10. Wow. Robert says 7, 6. Sarah says 9. Okay. Lisa, 7. Okay. All right. Those are all very good guesses. You guys are close. So let's break it down. I'm going to go through this picture and identify all of the ones that I have found. And the first one, actually, this was a really challenging one. The first one we have is actually the desk itself. So bonus points for anyone that got this one. This is really a tricky one. So the deal here is that it looks to me like this desk can be raised and lowered. And if it does that electronically, which many of them do, you just hit a button and it will raise it or lower it, then this entire desk will be energized with an electric field. I've measured several adjustable desks, and I'm always really surprised by just how high the electric fields are. And if you think about the fact that you're sitting in that field, usually with, you're in contact with that desk, you've got a lot of contact current going on there. So the good news is that this is easily remedied. So all you need to do is that, adjust the desk to where you want it and then unplug it from the wall. And that's it, you're done. By unplugging it, you eliminate all that voltage that would have otherwise been there. So that's a really easy fix. If you do have an adjustable desk that is electronic, just remember to unplug it once you've adjusted it to where you want it. All right, let's look at number 2. So just above the desk here, we've got the wireless speaker. At least it's what looks to me like a wireless speaker. So almost all of our wireless communication devices today are giving off radio frequency. Speakers like this are generally using Bluetooth. So just like your Wi-Fi or your cell phone signal, Bluetooth is just another way to send information through the air using radio frequency. Of course, we want to avoid this. The good news is that they still make speakers that you can plug into your computer. Easy. Or if you're using the speaker to connect to your phone, just make sure it has an auxiliary function. This means you can plug your phone into the speaker with a cord and disable the Bluetooth function. That way you still get the sound from your speaker, but you're wired instead of wireless, eliminating that radio frequency. Okay, so let's move on to number 3. Of course, the wireless mouse. I'm sure all of you saw this one. Just like the speaker, the wireless mouse uses Bluetooth. And here's the thing about a mouse. I don't get really why it needs to be wireless. I mean, it pretty much stays in the same place. And there's really just not that much need for it to be wireless. So a wire in this situation is really not that big of a deal. Because a wireless mouse uses Bluetooth to talk to the computer, every single time you click that mouse, you get a spike of radio frequency, which is completely unnecessary. So the solution here is really easy. You just get a wired mouse, right? Okay, so moving on to number 4, we have the keyboard, the wireless keyboard. So this is the exact same issue as the wireless mouse. The keyboard uses Bluetooth, and every single time you press a button on that keyboard, you're getting a radio frequency spike. Every button. And when I test these, it's a little bit terrifying when I hear people typing because you hear every spike. So of course, the solution here is simple. Just switch out to a wireless keyboard for a wired keyboard. That will remove the problem of the radio frequency. Now, you may have a high electric field on the keyboard as well. In fact, that's pretty common when I'm doing my measurements. One way to reduce this is to make sure the computer itself is properly grounded, which means it's plugged into an outlet with a grounded cord. So that may solve the problem, although sometimes it doesn't. And the only way to know here for sure is, of course, to measure. So even if you get a wired external keyboard, this is an area where it really is important to measure because you're not going to know what kind of electric field you have otherwise. And actually, the situation can get a little bit complicated when we're trying to ground it. So if you do have high fields, it's great. Really, I suggest have an EMF consultant to help you to solve the issue. However, I did actually find a really cool new product that I'm really excited about. So I have a building biology colleague that uses a wireless keyboard that uses infrared instead of radio frequency. So infrared's perfectly safe. And if you don't have a wire from the computer to the keyboard, then you are almost certain to reduce the electric field completely. So Like I said, I'm really excited about this option. I do have a link to one of them on my website if you want to check that out. And they gave me a discount code, which is great. So an infrared keyboard that's not attached to the computer will actually kill two birds with one stone, reducing both those electric field or the electric fields and the radio frequency. Not to mention the magnetic field that you can get from a laptop keyboard. So if you're using a laptop, I definitely suggest the infrared keyboard because you're going to get the magnetic, electric, and radio frequency all in one. Okay, so let's move on to number 5. Of course, number 5 is that big printer staring you right in the face there. Now, I really want you guys to pay attention here. When I'm evaluating a home for EMF exposure, one of the biggest offenders that I find is the printer. Not only is the radio frequency very high, but people leave them plugged in and turned on pretty much all the time. And where does that printer sit? Oftentimes right by you or right by your head. Most people just don't pay attention to the printer because they're not thinking about it, and so they leave it on 24/7. This is a really bad idea. The printer gives off a very high radio frequency reading, and it does so constantly. And sometimes I've had people get into their settings and actually disable the Wi-Fi, but for some reason it doesn't. I still pick it up on my my meter, which is a little bit scary if you think you've disabled it, but you may not have. So what most of my clients actually tell me is, well, I only print something a few times a week. And if that's the case, then there's simply no reason to blast yourself 24 hours a day. So the solution, again, is quite easy. Just keep it unplugged whenever you're not using it. When you need it, plug it in, print what you need to, and then unplug it again. And that's it. Okay, so this brings us to number 7. And so for this one, right under the computer there, you see what looks like a USB charging station. Now, the problem with this is that when anything is plugged in and charging, it's going to have an electric field on it. Almost every time I'm doing an assessment in a client's home, I find chargers plugged in, but nothing is actually on the charger itself. And when you do this, you're really just throwing money away. You're sending that voltage through the wire for no reason. More importantly, the closer you are to that wire, the more of an electric field you're getting. You'd really be surprised how high that field can be. Additionally, that charging station plugged into the wall may elevate the dirty electricity in the room. So the best way to use it is to, first of all, keep it at a distance from you. So plug it into an outlet on the other side of the room or just on the other side of the desk. And secondly, keep it unplugged when it's not needed or when you're not using it. If you need to charge something, fine, but when you're done, just unplug the whole thing. It might sound like a pain at first, but really your health is worth it. And if you want to make it easier, you can use an outlet switch or a power strip. So all you need to do is flip the switch on the power strip or the outlet switch, and you're done. That actually makes it very, very simple. Okay, so moving on to number 7, and this one was also a little, you can probably see that, but right next to what looks like the USB charging station is something else. Honestly, I can't tell for sure what it is. It could be an external hard drive, but it looks to me like it could be a cell phone. So we're just gonna go with that. Now, I know that every single person on this webinar here today knows that they should not be relying on their cell phone 24 hours a day. This is a device that we put right next to our heads, which gives off very high levels of pulsed modulated microwave radiation. So my suggestion to you is to keep that phone in airplane mode with both Wi-Fi and Bluetooth off. That's very important. Don't forget to turn off your Wi-Fi and Bluetooth as well. Sometimes they can just pop back on, so make sure you turn them off. And do that as much as you can. Keep the phone in airplane mode as much as possible. So what you can do is just turn it on a few times a day to check messages, or better yet, you can route your cell phone number to your landline. That way you won't even miss a call. And really none of us should be on call 24/7. Just reducing this expectation alone can really add a lot of time and value to your day. Now, of course, I realize that some of you feel like you aren't in a position to keep your phone in airplane mode, or for whatever reason, you need to have it on more often. And if that's the case, I really strongly suggest you get a product like the Shield Your Body phone pouch. Now, again, I would much rather you practice disconnecting from that phone completely, but when you don't have an option, using a phone pouch will decrease your exposure. Just make sure you have the shielded side facing you at all times. In the meantime, start to shift your behaviors and expectations to use wired forms of communication more often. There are even plenty of free apps that allow you to make phone calls through your computer, like Skype and Google Voice. You know, even if you have to leave your phone on for some reason, making those calls through a wired computer will be a huge improvement. All right, now we're on to number 8. And this was also a little bit of a tricky one. So there's a cordless phone right near the computer there. So they've got a cordless phone and a cell phone right in front of them. That's like a double whammy right there. So, you know, I'm really glad that this office has a landline. That's great. But a cordless phone gives off just as much radio frequency as a cell phone does, if not more. So the answer here really is simple. If you have a landline, just get rid of the cordless phone and replace it with a corded model. And if you've got multiple phones in the house, you know, of course, remember to do this for all the phones in your house so that you still have a landline, but it's corded, not cordless. Okay, now we're moving on to number 9, which is the lamp. Hopefully you guys caught that one. Now, of course, this probably doesn't have any radio frequency, but it will absolutely have an electric field. And then, you know, the closer your body gets to that lamp, the more of an electric field you have on your body. And if that light has a CFL or an LED light bulb, then you likely have increased dirty electricity. And you may actually even have a little bit of a radio frequency if you have a CFL light bulb too. So these bulbs can also have a lot of flicker, which is really disruptive to the eyes and the nervous system. I highly recommend using incandescent bulbs instead of LEDs or CFLs. Of course, the best thing you can do is utilize natural light from the sun. So when possible, keep your shades drawn and maybe even consider moving your workspace to a place in the house that has a lot of natural light if you don't already have that in the space that you're working. Your eyes, your nervous system, and your circadian rhythm will all greatly benefit from that natural light. Now, if you do need some extra light where you're working and you don't have a window, the answer is simply to move that lamp further away from you. Again, make sure that you're using incandescent light bulbs and make sure it's plugged into an outlet that's not right next to you. If you can find a lamp that uses a 3-pronged plug, that's even better. Most of them will only have 2 prongs, but if you have 3 prongs, it's that 3rd round prong that connects to the ground wire in your outlet. And when you do that, you can greatly reduce the electric field. And actually, you can even take your lamp to like a light store and have the cable switched out to a 3-prong plug if you have a lamp that you really like. That's actually a great idea. Okay, and now number 10, the one that you've all been waiting for, I'm sure, of course, is the computer. Now, which fields do you think the computer emits? I'll let you guys answer this in the chat. Of the fields that we've talked about, which ones do you think that we're concerned about from the computer itself? I know it can take a second to type into the chat. Magnetic. John says all of the above. Christine says EMF. Kimberly says all of the above. Yeah, you guys are right. All of the above. Yep, absolutely. Has all the fields. So it obviously has radio frequency if you're using it with a Wi-Fi connection. And of course, one of the best things you can do to reduce your EMF exposure is to hardwire your internet connection. I know so many people that won't do this because it's too inconvenient. And to that I say, well, how inconvenient is it if you or your family member starts to have health issues from their exposure? Is the cord really that big of a deal? It's the way we did it for a few decades at least, and we can still do it today. I still do it today. Your health is definitely worth it. Now, once you do hardwire, make sure that you turn off the Wi-Fi and the Bluetooth on the computer itself. A lot of people miss that step, but you got to get into your computer settings and disconnect the Wi-Fi and the Bluetooth on the computer. And really, if there's one thing that you take away from the webinar today, it's to hardwire your internet connection. I want that to be the #1 priority for everybody here today. So not only are you reducing your radio frequency exposure, but you're also creating a much faster, more secure, and more reliable internet connection when you do use an Ethernet cord. And I call that a win-win for sure. Okay, so in addition to the radio frequency, the computer will also have electric fields simply because it's running on electricity. And how much of an electric field it has really depends on many factors. The only way to know for sure is to measure it with a meter. And if you have a laptop, you may want to keep it plugged in, if you've got a 3-prong plug, or it actually might work better unplugged. There's really no way to know without testing because all situations are different. But one thing is for sure, the farther away your body is from the computer and its power cords, the better. So make sure that you're not sitting, right up close to the computer and that your cords aren't laying right at your feet. So I want you to take a second, look down at your feet. Are there any cords laying near you? I see this all the time, or chargers, or a tower. If any of those are close to you, I just want you to push them away as far as you can. Now, there are more advanced ways of reducing your electric fields, but it's something you'd want to work with a consultant on. There are grounding strategies that you can use with conductive tape or conductive tubing, but it really does take accurate measurements and knowledge of proper grounding. If you do test and find that your fields are high and you can't get them low enough with distance or with an external keyboard, then, of course, consulting with a professional is a good idea. And don't forget, we offer online consulting services right here at Shield Your Body. And you don't even have to have someone come into your house, which is kind of a, important consideration right now. Now, if you use a laptop instead of a desktop, as shown here, then there are a few things I want you to do. And the first one, never use the laptop on your body. I know it's called a laptop because most people put it on their laps, but I'm here to strongly encourage you not to do so. You'll be exposing your most sensitive body parts to very high magnetic fields, electric fields, radio frequency, and even dirty electricity if it's plugged in. And I call this a lose, 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 lose situation. This is really about the worst thing you can do. So my advice is to keep the laptop on a table or on a desk and use it with an external keyboard. Now, if you have people in your family that simply refuse to listen to you, as I understand this happens, then please get them a Shield Your Body laptop pad. This will help a lot to decrease that exposure to those precious organs. Okay, so magnetic fields can also be an issue. With laptops, I often measure very high fields, really right on the keyboard. And with desktops, there can be a high field on the tower itself or near the large screen. Every computer is really different. So again, you don't know without testing, but the fields generally do drop off with distance. So again, the key is to keep your distance. An external keyboard a few feet away from the monitor is a great idea to reduce the magnetic field. And that infrared keyboard I mentioned earlier will help with that magnetic field as well. Okay, so computers will also contribute to the dirty electricity on your wires. This is really common, and most often it comes from the computer charger. So it's a good idea to test with a dirty electricity meter. I like the green wave or the Graham-Stetzer meter to see if it's best for you to work with the computer plugged in or unplugged if it's a laptop. Now, computers can even contribute to the DC static electricity field. And of course, it emanates blue light. So one of the best things you can do for the static electricity is to make sure that you're surrounded by as many natural materials as possible. And if you can, use things like plants in the office, as well as maintain an appropriate humidity level so it's not too dry. So you guys probably know what it's like when winter comes and you turn on the heat and you get static electricity shocks when you go to turn on a light, things like that. A lot of times that's because it's so dry. And then of course for the blue light, you can wear computer glasses that have blue light tinting on them, or even, most prescriptions these days put a little bit of tint in there. Not as much as I would like to see though. Another thing you can do is install software on your computer like Iris or iFlux, and that will actually help to reduce some of that blue light and reduce a little bit of that flicker as well. Okay, so that's 10, and I had somebody that guessed 10 earlier, but in fact, we have one more. So we're gonna have 11 in total here. And I admit this one was a little sneaky. But down in the corner here, we have the chair, and you're thinking, what could possibly be wrong with the chair? Well, from this picture, we don't know what kind of material that chair is made of. It could be leather, but it's probably synthetic. And when you bring in this synthetic material into the office space, you're just gonna add to that static electricity field, which I was just talking about. So, this isn't necessarily a huge deal. But just remember that whenever you can avoid synthetic petroleum-based materials, you should do so. So try to bring only natural materials into your home whenever possible. And that goes for the carpet as well that's probably in this office. Okay, so that's it, all 11. So gold star to any of you that found all 11. That was a tricky one for sure. Okay, so I just want to kind of, start over with a nice fresh picture here. So if there's anything I missed or anything else that could be a source of EMFs in this picture, certainly there could be. There could be things that we don't see. I'm sure that there's electric fields just from the wires running through the walls. There may possibly be magnetic fields from sources we don't see, like overhead power lines or wiring errors, or appliances on the other side of the wall. There's likely dirty electricity because frankly, I find that just about everywhere. And certainly there could be radio frequency sources that we can't see. So the bottom line here is that I really want all of you to get savvy with using your own meters so that you know what's going on. All of the tips I've given you today are really, really important, but in reality, they're only the tip of the iceberg. We should all be competent in using our own meters so we take control of the situation for ourselves. I know it takes a little bit of work to understand how to use the meters and what they mean, but it's really worth it in the long run. And of course, we are always here to help you. Remember that we have consulting services for you at Shield Your Body. If you're feeling overwhelmed or need clarification about a topic, just schedule an appointment with me and I will walk you through it. Or if you have a building biologist in your area, I highly recommend hiring them to do a full assessment. Sometimes things can get complicated, like having current on your water pipe or on your cable lines, for example. And for things like that, you really do need some expert help. If you can't find anyone in your area, a lot of us are available for travel. I travel wherever people want me to go because, the ultimate goal here is to get your home as healthy as possible for years to come. And we want to help make sure you achieve that in any way possible. Okay, so I realized that was a whole lot of information in a short amount of time. So let's just do a quick recap of what we talked about today. So remember, the best thing that you can do, your number one priority here is to hardwire your internet connection. You just really need to get over any concerns about inconvenience. Your health is worth it. Everyone who lives in your home is worth this. Okay, make sure to keep anything and everything unplugged when you don't need it. This is especially important for your printer, your computer chargers, USB chargers, things like that. Just unplug them. Okay, I really want you to get rid of your LED and CFL light bulbs. These are both kind of EMF nightmares. So get some old school incandescent light bulbs, which will reduce your dirty electricity as well as be much easier on your eyes and your nervous system. Cordless phones are among the highest devices that I measure in people's homes. If you have a landline, which I strongly recommend, make sure that you use a corded phone. I also want you to start practicing better cell phone hygiene. Set the expectation for the people in your life that you're not available 24/7. If you're an emergency room physician, of course, maybe you need to be on call 24/7, but most of us aren't that important. We all need some downtime, right? It's really important for us to have some downtime. So I want you to practice keeping your phone in airplane mode as much as possible. The ultimate goal is to not have a cell phone at all, but one step at a time. If you do have a cell phone, consider a product like the phone pouch which will help you to reduce your exposure when the phone is on. Okay, remember, don't use your laptop on your lap. Keep it on a table or a desk and you use an external keyboard and mouse. If you do have to have it on your lap for some reason, or for those people in your life that won't listen, or if you have a teenager in your life, consider getting them a laptop pad, which will, at least reduce that exposure right against their precious organs. For anybody that wants to be a grandparent, please do this for your kids or your grandkids. Okay, remember to use natural materials inside your home whenever possible. This is also an important consideration for the air quality in your home, in addition to the static field electricity. And then finally, hire a professional to consult with or to do a full assessment on your home. I want you to start off by doing all the things we talked about today, but it really is important to have a qualified professional assess your home to help you identify the things that are beyond your scope. This is especially true for people that are having health issues. So I have really found that EMF exposure can be the missing link in many chronic health conditions. And if you don't address this issue, you're just going to keep spinning your wheels. So above all, everyone, do your best and then don't stress, right? We all have a lot of demands on our time and attention. So just start with the small steps that you can do now and work your way up. Over time, they all add up to make a big impact. So I hope that was all good information for you. Now, I know we have a lot of questions coming in, and as promised, I'll be doing a Q&A session here in a moment. But before we get to that, I know that R has some things that he would like to discuss. So R, send it back to you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Cathy. And this slide is totally adorable. So thank you for putting it in the presentation. Okay, so before we move into Q&A, there are a couple things I want to share with all of you live on the webinar. And if you haven't yet and you have questions, you can just scroll down a little and put them in the questions pod. We'll also be getting to the questions that you guys asked in advance, and we'll get to as many as we can while the room is running. But first thing, that I have two announcements. The first one, you've all now seen how knowledgeable Cathy is about EMF, and she's really an amazing resource. And she generously donates so much of her time to the community with her advocacy work and with webinars like this one. In fact, this is the third webinar she's run for SYB in the last 3 months. Of course, these webinars can only cover so much information. There's always more questions at the end, especially with a subject like EMF, which is so deep, so rich, and let's be honest, can be really complicated. And that's why I created SYB Consulting. With SYB, SYB Consulting is a remote consulting service. You can be anywhere and get personalized attention and custom advice from a real EMF expert. And I mean a real expert, because Cathy, our senior EMF specialist, is our first consultant. With SYB Consulting, you don't have to rely on random information you find on Google. and you don't have to spend hours searching for your answers to your specific questions, which may or may not exist out there. With SYB Remote Consulting, you can book time easily and instantly to get personalized advice and detailed answers about EMF from a certified EMF expert from the comfort of your own home or office, using Zoom, on your own schedule, and you get a recording of your session. In short, you can get precise answers and accurate information from a certified EMF expert. And for those of you live on today's webinar, I have a special offer for you. So if you book time today, so obviously the session isn't today, but if you book today for any time in the next 4 weeks, just enter code ANSWERS20 at checkout and you can save 20% off of your consulting session. So you just go to shieldyourbody.com/consult. And this offer is on the offers tab here in the room. So remember, you can book consulting anytime in the next few weeks, but this code will only work today. It's only for those of you who are attending this session live. If you're watching this as a recording, this code will not work. So if you have any questions about EMF, especially in your home or office, and you want real answers from a certified expert, be sure to act now. Now, that's for consulting. I also have a second offer for all of you attending this session live, and that's actually on my entire catalog. So it's a good opportunity to get some holiday shopping in a little early, especially with delivery times being so wonky these days. Cathy just spent a lot of time explaining that free ways that you can reduce EMF in your home office. And I really believe in and support that message, because here at SYB, I constantly tell people that the best EMF protection is free, because the best way to cut your EMF is to eliminate as many of those sources in your life as possible in the first place. Now, does that mean you shouldn't use EMF protection products? No, obviously, as someone who makes and sells EMF protection products, I don't believe or recommend that. If you follow Cathy's tips and the ones that you'll find throughout my website to reduce your exposure by eliminating these sources in your life, you'll make a huge difference in your exposure to EMF. But while the best EMF protection is free, good EMF protection products like the ones I make and sell can further reduce your exposure to EMF radiation. And to explain what I mean, I'll just take a few examples from my catalog. So look, here we have the 5G phone shield and the phone pouch. These are both designed to make it safer to carry your phone in your pocket when you need to. So with the phone pouch, you just put your phone in the pouch and then put the pouch in your pocket or belt. And I apologize for the background noise. I'm unfortunately powerless to do anything about that. You just put the pouch in your pocket or on your belt and you reduce your exposure. With the 5G phone shield, you just put that between your phone and your body. Now, the best solution is not to carry your phone, but a lot of people need to carry their phone. And that's why I make these products. And both products are lab tested to shield against new 5G frequencies up to 20 gigahertz. Another great example is my laptop pad, which Cathy also mentioned during the webinar. Just like with phones and pockets, you shouldn't use your laptop in your lap, but sometimes you need or want to. This is especially true for many people during quarantine, when a lot of us are working in areas that were never intended for work, like the sofa or a chair without a desk nearby. And that's why we make the SYB laptop pad. It makes it safer to use your laptop in your lap. Just place your laptop on top of the pad, and that will deflect your laptop's EMF radiation and heat emissions away from your body. I'll just cover one more because I apologize for the background noise right now. Another one of the SYB Healthy Living tips is to use speakerphone, because it helps you use your phone without putting it right up against your head. When you keep your phone further away, you're making a big difference in your exposure. But sometimes you can't use speakerphone, especially in public or in quarantine if there are other people in the room getting sick of hearing your every conversation. In cases like these, using a regular headset is much safer than holding the phone up to your head. But even then, the wires in a regular headset conduct straight EMF from your phone into your ear canal. So that's why I make the headset anti-radiation device, or HARD. With the HARD, You just plug it into your phone and then plug your website, your headset into the hard, and now all that stray radiation is filtered out. And I had a couple of other products there, but let's just skip ahead. So the discount code is homework15, and a reminder that this only works today until midnight tonight Pacific time. So in summary, we have two offers. We have the 20% on consulting with the Answers 20 code, and we have 15% off the rest of the catalog with the Homework 15 code. So again, these offers are just for those of you live in the webinar. If you're watching the recording, these will not work. But I hope if you have any questions about these, obviously we're here in the room to help answer them. And of course, now that I've finished with that, the lawn blower turns off. So I'll keep these up on the screen, but I know that there are a lot of questions that people have. So let me mute for a second here. Okay, so Cathy, I'm going to start with a couple that were asked in advance. And for those of you in the room, if you still have questions that you want, there's still time to get it posted into the pod. So I'll start with one here. What do you think of shungite rocks, and how can you tell if they work?
Excellent question. I'm not opposed to shungite at all. You know, it's a natural mineral we find in the earth. It's one of these things, just like all of the harmonizers and devices that claim to change the properties of the radio frequencies or the, you know, electromagnetic fields that are in the air. We really, even with shungite, we really just don't have a way to know for sure. So there are some videos online where somebody will have a shungite, you know, a piece of it, and then they'll take a meter and then they'll put the meter over it and say, oh my gosh, look at the meter reading. Though I don't know what they're doing, but that is not how it works with my meters. My meters do not change. There may be something that they're blocking the field or something, but it's not necessarily coming from the shungite. So I wouldn't put a lot of weight into those videos. So, you know, it's just, we just really don't know. Among my most sensitive clients, I would say that occasionally someone will say, yeah, actually, I feel better with it. And if that's the case, great, because it's not entirely expensive. I mean, you can get little stones that you can keep in your pocket for a couple bucks, and I have no problem with that. But, you know, we just don't know if it is really doing what the claims are. So it's just another one of these, you know, kind of buyer beware situations, unfortunately.
Condo, and this, I think a lot of people have questions like this. Living in a condo, there are 4 smart meters by my bedroom. Other than moving, how do I diminish my exposure?
Yes, great question. I would shield that, which can be tricky, but if it is on a wall in your home, I would shield it. If you go to my website, wholehomeandbodyhealth.com, I do have a product there listed, which comes from less EMF, it's like a wall shielding kit to shield specifically in this kind of situation. So it's like this heavy duty metal that you put on the wall itself, and then it, you know, of course, gives you instructions on how to apply it. And then it has a router guard that you what am I saying? Router guard. One of the circular metal shields that you put over the utility meter outside. So that's what I would do. You know, it's best if you could test that before and after, so you can know, you know, if you did it properly or if you need more. But if you can't move and it's on the other side of a wall that you spend time in, absolutely shield it with one of these kits. And I would not make a living space right there if that's possible. Like I wouldn't have a bed right there or a couch, you know, make that a space that is somewhere that you don't spend as much time as other places in your home.
Thank you. One more question that was submitted in advance, and then I'll jump to some from in the room. And this is a great one, I think, and we get one like this a lot. What are the best ways to protect against EMF radiation from a computer monitor? And the reason I like this one is because, you know, computer monitors, you have to see them. So how do you actually shield against something, you know, like that?
Sure. Yeah. So for most people, distance is your best friend here. So as much distance that you can have from that monitor. Secondly, you know, I'm going to assume you're talking about the electric field here, because that's what the computer itself is, the monitor is going to give off. You want to make sure it's properly grounded, so it's plugged in with a 3-pronged plug, which it should be. The other thing for really sensitive people, you can use a shielding cloth over it, which is what I would suggest. You know, you can get really, really fine shielding fabric that you can just drape over it. I know it's a little bit weird, but you know, I have clients that are that sensitive that they have to put the fabric over the monitor itself. You can see through it, but you know, it's a little inconvenient, but if you're that sensitive, then I would recommend that. And you'll have to ground it. You put a little alligator clip on the cloth and then you plug the other end into a grounded outlet. Yeah, that's it. And you know, distance though is really going to be the best option.
Thank you. So we have a question here in the room from Susan. Which solar panel systems do not emit as much dirty electricity? Is it true that only a few microinverter lines are cleaner? Can you share which models? I don't know how specific you can get into models, but we always get questions about solar power systems. So if you could dive into that.
So unfortunately, I don't have a good answer for this because there aren't good options. I really wish that there were, and I've talked with a lot of manufacturers who claim that they have created their systems to be very low EMF, you know, and they have sensitive individuals in mind. But among my colleagues, we have this discussion quite a bit, and we've tested them. We've tested many. There is not a system out there at this time that I would say is safe for sensitive people. And by that, it's probably not entirely safe for most people. You know, I am all for renewable energy and for energy saving devices, but right now we're just not there yet, unfortunately.
Do you know how to reduce EMR while inside a Tesla? Is there a way to, so she's talking specifically here about the Tesla and also specifically about the touchscreen. If you could also dive in a little, because I know more and more cars emit more and more of this stuff, and we get a lot of questions about it. And I'd be really interested to hear what you have to say about protection in a car.
Sure. Yeah, that is a really good question. So it kind of depends on which field. So, you know, if you're talking about the Tesla, then we could be thinking about magnetic and electric fields. If you go to Less EMF, the website, they actually have an article on there on how you can shield different components in your car, which is pretty cool. And some of it is using like this G iron or Gearon, some people call it, but it's this woven metal, or it's this thick, heavy metal that can shield point sources of magnetic fields, and it will also shield radio frequency and electric fields pretty easily. The key here is that you have to know what you're shielding. So you need a meter to test, right? You got to figure out what the source is so that you know how to shield it. And of course, if there's any radio frequencies that you can disable, you know, that's going to be really important. Some cars you can do that, some cars you can't. I don't know about Tesla. I haven't gotten in there and tried it. I would imagine that they would think, why would you want to disable this, and probably not give you an option, but hopefully they do. And I would just contact them and say, hey, can I, tell me how to disconnect my Bluetooth or whatever it is. And then for the shielding part, a lot of times the highest fields that we'll get is like right behind the gas pedals, right where your feet are. So again, you use that G iron underneath there. And I would highly suggest you go to Less EMF and find that article because it walks you through it and it tells you how to test before and after and what materials to use and everything. So it's all right there for you. Mm-hmm.
Okay, so Martina's asking about removing Wi-Fi on the back of a smart TV. Where is it located? I actually just went through this last week with someone where they already had their TV hardwired. And I said, well, have you turned off the Wi-Fi? And they said, what do you mean? So we went into the settings, and on each TV it'll be different, but you go into the settings, and on most of them, there's an option to actually just say, disable Wi-Fi. So I don't know if you have anything specifically to add to that, Cathy.
Yeah, well, I help people with that quite a bit as well. And what I find is sometimes the signal will stop and sometimes it will not. Even if you say disable Wi-Fi in those settings, doesn't guarantee that it stops the emission of the radio frequency. I don't know why, but so you have to test, you have to measure to know if your TV actually does stop that frequency, if it doesn't. And if it doesn't, you can actually open up the TV itself on the back and there will be a couple of antennas in there. It might be Bluetooth or it might be Wi-Fi. Obviously I don't recommend anybody just go and open their TV because you could break it or do it incorrectly. But I would probably reach out to somebody if you don't, an electrician in your area, or there's probably a resource in your area, like an audio visual equipment type of place that may be able to help you with that. There's also a bunch of videos like on YouTube that tell you how to do that for different TVs. So I would look that up online and just ask, because people are doing this. Hopefully you can find whatever TV you has and it will show you step by step how to take off the back, find the antennas, and you just remove them. It's pretty cool.
Thank you. Okay, let's see. Stephen asks, and I know you won't be able to answer this specifically, but maybe you can give him some ideas. Why does my Ethernet connection have a fairly big electric field on it?
I can answer that. So, well, the reason could be several different things. So, if you have like a Cat5 cable that is not shielded, it will typically have a high electric field because it's running electricity through it. It's connected to your devices, and so it's got electricity running through it. If you have a Cat6 or a Cat7 that is shielded, it will also have that electric field because it's not grounded properly. So that is an important thing to note. When you do hardwire your computers and you're using an Ethernet cord, you want to make sure that it's grounded properly. And this is why I've said several times today, like doing that grounding properly can be a little tricky because you only want one grounding point. And so what that means is if your computer is plugged in via a three-pronged plug and your router is plugged in via a three-pronged plug and you're running a shielded Cat6 cable from the router to your computer, you're actually grounded twice because you're grounded via the router and you're grounded via your charger, and that creates a loop and that can cause a high electric field. So like I said, it gets a little tricky, but I would first see, do you have a shielded Ethernet cord and are you grounded properly? And sometimes, unplug if it's a laptop, unplug it and see if that field goes down. or, there's various ways that you can play with that. So you're going to have to just kind of do some testing to determine, which method is best. If you need to unground, let's say your router, for example, you might need to do that, or unground your computer, for example. And then the other piece of it is, I've got an Ethernet cord right here, but it does have a little bit of an electric field on it, but I keep it at a distance. It's 4 feet from me, and so the fields of where I'm at are relatively minimal. So distance is always your friend.
Okay, thank you. Mary asked, what is the connection for infrared keyboards? I think the question there is, how does that actually communicate with the...
Sorry, you echoed a little bit there. Can you repeat that one?
Oh, sorry. How does an infrared keyboard connect with a computer? Like how does it communicate?
Oh, sure. Yeah. So it has a little, I don't know, station that you plug into the computer that has an infrared, and so the infrared from the keyboard has a little infrared that communicates with a device that you plug into the computer. So just like an old remote would, right? Our remotes all were infrared. Many of them still are. They have that little red dot on there, and it's connecting to a little station right in your TV. So it's just connecting through those two signals.
Back to some of the questions that were asked in advance. So regarding a smart meter, the company said they can install it but not activate it. Will there still be EMF? And if so, what shielding options are available?
Wow, boy, that scares me a little bit.
Yeah, I wouldn't trust it. As I thought, yeah.
I wouldn't trust it either. I really would not trust it. Okay, but let's say they're good people and they're being honest with you. Here's 2 considerations. Well, first of all, you have to have a meter, right? You have to have a meter to test it because you don't know unless you test it for yourself. Secondly, how are they then communicating your usage back to the utility company? So are they sending that through the lines in your house, which would be a power line communication meter? Here in Idaho, in the southern part of Idaho, we use all power line communication meters. They're not radio frequency, but that doesn't necessarily mean it's better because it sends the data through your wiring, and our electrical wiring is not meant to carry data. So it can have, high dirty electricity and these unwanted fields on the lines through our house, which is not better. So I guess my question is how, what's your situation going to be? First of all, test it. You have to know. And you can get an expensive dirty electricity meter to test as well. So, if they're coming to read it, great. That's the best. If they have really what you want is an analog meter. You really, really, really want to try your best to get an analog meter. That's the gold standard. If they don't and they refuse and they're going to hook up your meter and they're not going to enable the radio frequency, it's kind of a toss-up. You might have dirty electricity at that point. So the answer really is you have to test to know, really.
Okay, let's see. So this one, I'm trying to summarize. It's a longer question, but this person lives in an apartment or a block of flats. So they're using a LAN for all the internet in their apartment, but their neighbors' Wi-Fi, all their neighbors have Wi-Fi. So what can they do about that?
Mm-hmm. Okay. Okay, so there's a couple different options you've got here. If you know your neighbors and you are friendly with them, and they are willing to have you buy them a router guard, that's super. I mean, you know, sometimes people don't know this, and when they get the information, they're like, okay, we'll hardwire too. I mean, that's the best thing, is you can educate them, and sometimes people will change their behaviors, and that would be super. I realize that's not always going to happen. Some people are willing to put a router guard or a cover on their, or like a Faraday cage or one of these boxes, so that it substantially reduces your exposure. And if they're willing to do that, awesome. The other thing you can do is, if you know the location of their router, you can shield it. I mean, usually the router is really close to a wall. So if you're sharing a wall, you may have the opportunity to shield your wall right close as possible to their router, so that you minimize the angle. So the closer you are to them with the shield, to the router with the shielding material, the less you need, because you're just kind of chopping off that angle right there. So there's shielding fabrics for that. There's paint. There's actually the Mylar blankets, like the space blankets, which cost like $5, are really effective. The grabber or graber, I don't know how to pronounce that, are the ones that I've used really effectively. So yeah, you could just, you know, shield that if you can. Now, if you're at more of a distance, again, distance should drop that field off, drop your exposure off dramatically. So it's really your closest neighbors that you want to kind of focus on. And there are plenty of like free apps that you can use on your phone or even your computer that will bring up the decibel strength of the Wi-Fi routers in your area, so you get a relative example of how strong their signal is. And then that way you can know, you know, I've got, you know, this router I got to deal with and this one. And we're just going to really hope that your neighbors are going to be willing to work with you and listen to you. And even if they didn't want to cover the router, like the, you know, at Shield Your Body, we have like the picture frames. Even if they put that behind their router, will make a huge impact. It won't affect their signal at all, but putting it behind their router, you know, which with to the wall closest to you, will completely block off that angle right there, and you're not going to get it. So yeah, let's hope that they're willing to have those conversations with you.
Thank you. That was really good. So I like this next question, and this was submitted in advance, and then I'll get back to some from in the room. But what I like about this question is its simplicity and how it applies to everybody, which is, what do you do first? Where do you start?
That's a great question. What do you do first? Well, I would get comfortable with unplugging things, really, because for many reasons, actually. So I saw a couple comments in the chat about some of these energy saving devices and the Tesla car that, you know, we need to be focusing on energy saving stuff. And I agree completely. But the best way to do that really starts with our behaviors. So if we can utilize natural sunlight more, and reduce our usage of electricity, that's the biggest impact we can make. We don't have to have every light on in the house every night, right? I use candles. I know that sounds like archaic, but I love them. They give me the light that I need. And I rarely turn a light on in the house. Maybe I'll have one incandescent light bulb on in the evenings, and that's about it. But just this phantom energy usage that most of us do constantly by having all of, you know, the toasters plugged in, the coffee makers plugged in, the TVs plugged in, and we leave them plugged in all the time. None of that, and that's power. If I put a volt sensor up to that, it's going to beep because those wires are hot. So we're just bleeding energy just because we have stuff plugged in. So I strongly recommend we get used to unplugging stuff, or get one of these little outlet switches that has a little button on it, and just you kill it right there. Same thing as a power switch. So I think that we need to practice better hygiene around this stuff, and and make sure that we are keeping as much of our electronic devices off and have less reliance on this stuff. And then from there, I would say, it's your internet and your phone. These are your two biggest exposures, everybody. Your two biggest exposures are your Wi-Fi and your cell phone. So like I said, my first priority, besides unplugging stuff, is I want you to hardwire your internet. Until you do that, unplug it at night or put it on a light timer so you don't have it on at night. But after that, hardwire your internet. That's my number one message for everybody. And after that, do your best to keep your phone on airplane mode. Those things right there are going to dramatically reduce your exposure.
That was great. Thank you. It was really succinct and really kind of 80-20 rule kind of approach. I really like that. Susan asked, do metal features that are in contact with the person, such as metal arms on the chair, are they a concern? So furniture with metal, because I know, we've talked in the last webinar about metal spring mattresses, for example. So I think this is more broadly about furniture in general.
Yeah. Sometimes it can. It depends on the metal. So the issue with mattresses is that a lot of times they're iron, and the compression of the iron over time can turn it into a magnet. And then you get these, that acts kind of like an antenna or a magnet. And so you get an increase in those fields. A lot of metal, though, most metal does not become magnetized. And so, the armchairs, things like that, I don't really think it's a huge deal. If you're in a really elevated electric field, it may increase it a little bit, but you're already in a really, high electric field, and you got to mitigate that anyway. So I wouldn't really worry about it a ton, because, essentially, if it is an issue, you've got another issue that you have to address anyway. And this is where, knowing, you have to have a meter to know, is really invaluable.
Thank you. Next question from John is, would a negative ion generator help with static fields? And I'd just add to that question, what is your experience with negative ion generators? Do they help, and with what?
I like the idea a lot, but I can't say that I have seen anyone have the success with them that I wish. And I remember at one of my building biology seminars, we had a long conversation. Several of us had a long conversation about that. And someone said, this stuff is still, it's man-made. It's a great idea, but we are creating these ions with an electric device, and it's man-made. How good can it be? And I kind of agree with that philosophy. We're trying to fight fire with fire in a negative sense here. Not to say that they can't help some people, but I choose not to spend my money on them, because I just don't think, if they do help, it's not a ton. But again, this comes back to, some of my clients use this pendant and they say, oh my gosh, it changed my life. And I have another client that used the exact same one and they say it made me feel worse. So it does kind of come down to, well, what works for you? And we're all different, biochemical beings with different experiences and different histories. So what helps one person might not help another. So I typically say, if you want to try something like that, get something that has, a 30, 60-day money-back guarantee or something, and try it out. And if you don't like it, then you can send it back, because it can get really expensive trying this stuff. Thank you.
So another question that was asked in advance, and obviously I think this one, it's too long to give a complete answer would be too long, but I think it would be useful for people to hear, how you would approach this. And this person is building a new home and wants to know how to make it as EMF safe as possible. So they're at the stage where they can actually make design decisions. So what should they be thinking about, and how would they proceed to make it safer?
I love it when people are in that position. They have such a great opportunity to create a healthy home. So there's several things you can do, but again, and you're probably not going to like this answer, but I want you to test, because we need to know what's going on first before we build. So, we're hoping that you don't have a magnetic field from power lines. If you do, there's one of two options. Either you walk away from it because you can't do anything about it, or there's one thing that you can try, which, I know one person in the country that kind of develops this system to help move the magnetic field just kind of out of your home area. But you have to have the right kind of space for that, because if you have a neighbor on the back of you, you can't really move it to their area, right? And it's very expensive, like $10,000 to $20,000 kind of a thing. So we're going to hope you don't have a magnetic field. Let's say everything's really pristine. Well, it's pristine as far as the magnetic fields go, but you've got a cell tower in the distance. You have to know. You have to know what kind of radio frequency you have, because then that's going to help you dictate, well, do we need to build this with shielding in place? Because you may want to, and there's different kinds of shielding. There's metal roofs, there's foil that you can put in the walls, there's window cling, there's metal siding. So you have to know that piece of it, whether you want to shield it or not. And then you're also in a great, you have a great opportunity to put your wires in metal clad, which means that the wires will be shielded. So when the wires run through your walls, they are going to minimize that electric field and the dirty electricity field. And I highly recommend that for sure. That's a really, really great thing you can do. But ultimately, I would suggest that you consult with an expert on this, because, I would want to know the details of everything going on so that we can make the appropriate recommendations for you and exactly, what your ultimate goals are. Because there's too many variables to just kind of give a checklist. So yeah, I mean, if I were you, I would hire someone, and, don't forget about the air quality. Maybe you're already doing that, but you're in a good position too to build a really low VOC with natural building materials. It's really fun and exciting that you get to do that. But I probably would consult with an expert on that.
Okay, thank you. Susan asks, I heard that one needs to get shielded Ethernet cables. How significant is this?
Well, yeah, so the shielded Ethernet cables are going to be what cuts down that electric field. But again, like I was talking about earlier, you have to make sure that those shielded cables are grounded properly. So that's part of the process. I guess it kind of depends. If you have one device in your home that you're going to connect to an Ethernet cord, and it's, it's not in a living space and you're not that exposed to it, it's probably not that huge of a deal. But if you're running Ethernet cords all over the house and under bedrooms or 2 bedrooms and things like that, then I would pay more attention to that. You just got to make sure that you ground it appropriately. And one of the best ways to do that is you can ground it to the router if the router has metal on it. If it doesn't, there are ways to get around that. You can buy a little grounding kit. Let's see, I think Electrosense or Electrohealth has a grounding kit specifically for this. You just got to make sure that you're grounding at one spot, not multiple spots. So, again, it gets a little tricky. You can do it, but, don't hesitate to consult with somebody if that gets a little confusing.
Thank you. Let's see. Andrew asks, is it better to use a cell phone using Wi-Fi or cellular?
No way to answer that without testing. You guys are sick of hearing me say that, but
I'm seeing a trend here in your answers.
yeah, I mean, there's too many variables. We don't know because it depends on the location of the cell tower, for example. So if you have a very poor reception of the cell tower and you've got like one bar on your phone, that phone is actually going to really ramp up the radio frequency on that so it can make that connection. So you're going to get a pretty high exposure from that. But your Wi-Fi router, I don't know, do you have 2.4 gigahertz and 5 gigahertz enabled? Do you have just one? Hopefully you have just 2.4 because that's better. How close are you to that, to the router? I mean, all of these variables, the phone itself, they all make a difference. So I would probably test to see if there is one method that gives you lower readings than the other. But actually, what I would do if I were in your position is I would hardwire your phone to your internet router. That's the best thing you can do. All you have to do is get an adapter for your phone so that you can put an Ethernet cord in the adapter, and then you can use Wi-Fi as much as you want, and you can have the cell data turned off, or not Wi-Fi. You can use the internet as much as you want when it's connected via an Ethernet cord. Even if the Wi-Fi is on, if you have to leave it on for some reason, you're not going to get that exposure coming out of your phone if you use an Ethernet cord to the phone itself. So that would be your best option.
Thank you. Another question here from Tammy. How do you decrease risk for kids using Chromebooks for remote learning? So the kids are on Chromebooks for 5+ hours a day for their homeschool, for their remote learning from home. How are they, what can they do to reduce risks?
Well, so with the Chromebooks as well, you should be able to get an adapter that you can plug an Ethernet cord into them. Unless it's some new device that I'm not aware of, that's not an option. But any of these devices, you should be able to buy an adapter so that you can hardwire them. And if you can't, well, Shield Your Body has the laptop pad. I would absolutely use that if for some reason you can't disable. I mean, even still for the electric fields and the magnetic fields, I would still do that. Also, using a stylus is a good idea for really electrically sensitive people. Using a stylus instead of your finger right on the computer itself can be helpful because it does give you a little bit of distance. And then there's also clothing. There's clothing that will help protect their vital organs. And I know that Shield Your Body is coming out with a line of clothing now, and there's blankets. I would probably use some of those devices so that if for some reason you can't disable that Wi-Fi and you can't hardwire it, you're at least blocking it with those protection devices.
Thank you. Yeah, and I'd reiterate clothing. And we have we're as Cathy mentioned, we're planning to grow our clothing line, but right now the blankets or the bandanas, or for men, the underwear, those are great. In general, apparel is a really effective way to provide shielding, especially from things that aren't in your control. So thank you for that question, Tammy. I know this answer, Cathy, but is it okay to have wearables on while sleeping that use Bluetooth if cell phone is on airplane and Bluetooth is off?
Well, so you're saying, so the question is, I guess, if the Bluetooth is enabled, is it okay?
Yeah.
And the answer is you have to test it to make sure that the Bluetooth is really off. So I know of one device called the Aura Ring, which I used to have one, but I lost it. But when you disable the Bluetooth, it goes off. It definitely goes off, and that's fine. You can wear that overnight. So if you're talking about a different device, if you disable the Bluetooth and the Wi-Fi function they're totally fine to wear while you're sleeping. You just have to really make sure that it is off, because like we've said multiple times, you can disable the Wi-Fi or Bluetooth, but that doesn't necessarily mean that the signal's still not emitting. So you got to check.
Thank you. That's a funny one. No, we won't ask that. Oh, I don't know what you might have to say about this, but Martina asks if there are differences in terms of EMF between the iPhone 11 and 12 5G.
I don't know, because I have not tested an iPhone 12, but there should be, because it's enabling you to get the 4G connection plus the 5G connection. So I would imagine that it would be higher, just because it's giving you another band to connect to. So it will be, sending out a signal to connect to that 4G connection. And it's also going to try to say, hey, well, I want to do the millimeter waves as well. So it's probably, I would imagine it would double. That's a really loose guess, but I would imagine you've got now 2 frequencies it's trying to connect to, so it would increase it. But I haven't tested it, so I can't say for sure. But I personally would not want a 5G enabled phone for that reason.
Okay, yeah. Yeah, a lot of people don't realize that you actually, well, this Martina, I think, does, but a lot of people that we talk to don't realize that 5G just doesn't appear on your phone. You actually have to get a 5G phone. And right now most of them cost an awful lot of money.
Yeah.
So yeah, you have the option not to get a 5G phone.
Yeah, and I would add to that, from what it sounds like in the cities that are rolling it out, it hasn't been wildly successful. I'm hopeful in that regard that it's not going to be blanketed in every part of the country. Fingers crossed, that may or may not come to fruition, but it's not really reliable, and it's not panning out to be the wicked fast, really good connections that the industry wanted.
This one I'll just take real quick. Well, Christine's asking if the discount will work if you purchase the products on Amazon. No, this discount is only valid on my website. So that was quick. Let's see. Okay, so Kimberly asks, you've mentioned before to be careful painting all the walls in a room with shielding paint. Does the same concern apply if putting shielding fabric on all the walls and ceiling?
Yeah, yes. So I guess the question is fabric as effective as the paint? And yes, it is. You do want to be careful, though, with fabric, that it is, like if you have a curtain and I can't demonstrate that very well. If you have a curtain and it's kind of loose and flowy, then the waves can kind of get in there and kind of sneak their way out. So you do want it to, be a good connection, so that it doesn't have ways to kind of sneak around the fabric. But yeah, fabric works very well. And it's, you only need really 1 layer of the fabric because it's pretty dense. Now you may or may not want to ground it, depending on the electric fields in the environment. So you would want to see if you have high electric fields, and then you would want to ground it, which some fabric you can ground and some fabric you can't. So again, you want to know your electric field situation before you invest in fabric.
Thank you. Michelle asks, what is the safest TV to buy, LCD or the older kind? So what's the difference in emissions between different technologies of television?
Well, that's a challenging question, because different ones have different properties. So like the old plasma TVs are really nice, but they can tend to have high dirty electricity fields. In general, I like the older TVs because you're going to have less, you're going to run into less of the problems of disconnecting the radio frequencies, the Bluetooth and the Wi-Fi. And really, again, no matter what TV you have, it's best to just keep it unplugged. Keep it on a power strip when you're not using it and unplug it, and that's going to solve your problem most of the time. Unless you've got it on all day long, in which case, yeah, the older TV models are generally better. But again, you know, they're all different, so you got to test. But I don't really have a lot of trust in the newer models because every new model that comes out, it's like they make it more and more difficult to disable the radio frequencies. So, unfortunately.
Denise asks, can you talk about dirty electricity and what happens when you use those plugins to decrease it? Is dirty electricity still high there, but at higher frequencies that aren't picked up on the meter?
Well, that's a great question, and sounds like somebody who's done their homework. Yeah, you are correct in that the frequencies might not actually go away when you plug in the capacitive filters, the little small filters, throughout the house. And I actually don't recommend that. So what happens, what we're finding is that when you plug those meters into an outlet in a room, sometimes the dirty electricity will be taken off of the hot wire, but it will move on to the neutral wire. And that's not good. We don't want that, of course. And so it looks like it's gone because the meter is connected to the hot wire, and so the numbers have reduced, but that doesn't mean that it's gone. It's just maybe it has moved. So what I actually like to do is use those at the main panel. That's really the best way to do this. So the thought here is that you're getting dirty electricity coming in from the grid itself. You're getting it from your neighbors and you're getting it from the power grid. And so you want to filter that right at the panel, right where your electricity comes into your home. I have an electrician install 2 new outlets right there before it reaches your breaker panel. And I install the filters right on those 2 outlets. And that helps dramatically. And then you got to make sure that you're, you know, mitigating those high dirty electricity devices in your home, like the CFL or the LED light bulbs, and you're keeping things unplugged. And, you know, you don't have solar panels or a pool pump and things like that, because those are almost impossible to really filter. So that's the best way to do it. Install 2 new outlets right at your panel, plug those filters in right there, and mitigate everything else in your home so you reduce your exposure.
I lost the question. I have to mark it as, there we go. Mark it as answered. Okay, so Anne asks, would shielding my side of the wall bounce more EMF back to the neighbors? And that's something you and I were talking about right before the webinar, actually.
Yeah, so, well, it depends on where, I mean, yes, it will, but your neighbors would have to be really close to you for that probably to be kind of a big issue. And maybe they are, but so we frequently talk about something called the inverse square law in building biology, which means that every little bit of distance dramatically decreases the power from the radio frequency fields. So if you shield your wall, yes, it will, but the deflection is going to go in all different directions. It's not like you're amplifying that you're going to amplify their exposure so much that you're going to be a bad person, you know, or a bad neighbor. I wouldn't really worry about it too much unless their house is really, really close to you, and whatever their device is very close. I mean, you'd have to be, you know, within a couple feet for it to make that huge of a difference. So I think I kind of need a little bit more information about what you're shielding and how close you are to the house, but it probably won't be that big of a deal.
Thank you. I'm going to jump back to some of the questions that were asked in advance. So Andrew asks, he says he suffers from EMF and light sensitivity. He has to use his phone a lot during the day, and it depletes him. He feels it immediately. What would be the best option for him to protect himself? I mean, given that he's particularly sensitive and it's a requirement.
Yeah. Well, I really sympathize with you because that's a very difficult situation. And honestly, this is the time where I would say I would try some of these harmonizing devices and things like that. I mean, of course, the clothing, if you haven't tried the clothing yet, do that. Absolutely do that. And if your diet isn't really, really rich in antioxidants, do that. You know, antioxidants help us to combat a lot of the exposure. I could get really deep with this question.
Yeah, go for it.
I'll try to. Okay, so what I find about people who are highly sensitive is that there's something else going on that's making them, you know, react so aggressively. Most of the time I see that as a mold exposure. I mean, almost every person I talk to that is sensitive has had a mold exposure at some point in their life. So working with a really qualified practitioner to identify if you have that, or if you've had a heavy metal exposure, or if you've had amalgam fillings, the silver fillings, if you've had any, you know, mercury toxicity, if you've got an underlying issue, a parasite maybe, small intestinal bacterial overgrowth, blood sugar imbalance, all of these things you have to clean up first. So if you haven't done those things, you know, working with a good functional medicine practitioner who can run some good labs and can identify if you've got infection or a mold exposure, you know, whatever these things are, and then really building the body up from the foundation is going to help you to be more tolerant. That's really, really important. You know, we all want to get to the place where our body is more tolerant. And beyond that, there are other, you know, concussions. If you've had a history of concussions, that can also really disrupt the nervous system. Beyond that, there are things you can do like neural retraining programs, which kind of help the body get out of its sympathetic state. Sometimes you can get into this chronic sympathetic state where the body thinks it's, you know, being offended all the time. You're always on alert. You're always in fight or flight, and that's going to make you a lot more hypersensitive. So, you know, these neural retraining programs can be really helpful. And it's basically kind of retraining that brain to say, no, you know, there might be this little thing out there, but I'm not going to overreact to it. And along those lines, doing things to get into your parasympathetic nervous system are critical for everybody on this call. Doing deep breathing exercises, meditating, yoga, laughter, whatever it is for you, so that you're not always on high alert, so that you get into your parasympathetic nervous system so that your body can relax. Very, very, very important. And then there are many supplements that I like, you know, antioxidant supplements that I think are very valuable. I've had a lot of very sensitive clients do really well with a product called Carbon 60, which is one of the highest antioxidant supplements that exists. I do have that on my website if you want to go check it out. It gives, you know, there's a link over there if you want to look more into that. And then once all that's done, which is a very long process, but very important. I don't have any problem with people trying these different devices. So if you want to try some of these pendants, there's, you know, the Q-Link and the Harmony pendant, and there's Blue Shield, and I mean all of these different ones, which again, I don't recommend any of them because I can't verify that they work. But I do have clients that have success with them, and I think it's worth it to try if you have to be on a phone all day and you are sensitive. And then again, the clothing, make sure that you're utilizing that clothing, which is going to be really important for you so that you can, minimize the radio frequency exposure that you're having. So kind of a long answer, but
that was great. Thank you. That was fantastic.
Good.
So we have another question submitted in advance that's related to another that we talked about earlier. If considering a newly constructed residence, is a wood frame or prefab metal preferred?
I prefer wood, personally, just because the metal can act as an antenna in specific situations. If it's all done well and shielded well and you're using MC cable and, it's all grounded beautifully, then it might not be an issue. But if you have the opportunity, if those things aren't being done, I would prefer wood.
Thank you. Another question, can electric fields in a wall be shielded with foil or fabric? In this example, to block exposure while sitting at a desk near that wall. So in broader terms, what can you do if you're measuring high electric fields coming out of a wall? What are your options?
Yeah, you can shield it. So back to, some of the companies I use, like Less EMF or Safe Living Technologies, they do sell some of this more heavy duty foil, or I'm sorry, aluminum rather, that will shield. Now, it just kind of depends, exactly the situation. If it's the bedroom, I prefer to turn the breakers off at night or install something like a sleep safe kill switch so that we de-energize those wires. But if you can't, and if you're obviously, we're talking about the home office environment, you can get that sheet of the aluminum, and it will block those electric fields. You might have to ground it though. So again, you're gonna have to have a meter to figure out the best way to utilize it. And you're gonna have to think about, is there something underneath me as well? If there's a floor underneath you and there's high electric fields, then you gotta consider that. If you're on a ground floor and you've got high fields on the wall, but you have to have power because you're working on a computer, you can do it. Fabric can work as well, but again, you gotta have a meter to test to decide whether you have to ground it or not. You probably have to ground it. And then you wanna, make sure that you get a big enough piece so that you're, getting the kind of the bleeding edges, so to speak. So yeah, I do like that option. I do recommend it.
Thank you. So here's another one. I know distance is your friend when using appliances or technology, but does quality of airflow help? So for instance, does opening a window with fresh air flowing in, does that help with EMF at all?
Boy, that's a good question. I don't know. Not anything that has registered significantly on my meters. However, I recommend that people open their windows all the time anyway, just for air quality purposes. And I think getting fresh air can reduce some of the insult on your body from the EMFs because you're supporting your body, you're supporting, your respiration and your brain function to better be able to handle the exposure that you're getting. Fresh air is very, very, very important. So I don't know that it's going to reduce the readings to any significant effect, but I still do it anyway. Plus, if you've got a river nearby or if it's raining or something like that and you have those negative ions, that will definitely help. So yeah, I would do it. It's a good idea.
Thank you. Okay, so just let everyone know we're running up against the end of the room here. There's actually a time limit on these rooms. So we're going to get to a few more questions, and there's a lot of, Cathy, just so you know, there's a lot of people still in the room. There's a lot of people sticking around to hear your answers. But I just wanted to remind everybody of the two specials that are today only. So if you want the consulting or you want any of my other products, the discount codes are here on the screen. These will only work until midnight tonight Pacific time. So that's about 9 hours. You have 9 hours. The coupon codes are here on the screen, and the links are here on the screen, or you just go to shieldyourbody.com, and that's where you can shop for these. So another question that was submitted in advance is there any type of EMF floor heating? I'm sorry, is there any type of floor heating that's EMF safe? And I think they're talking about like the radiant floor heating.
Yeah, the hydroponic radiant floor heating is great. We recommend that actually quite a bit because it doesn't use electricity running through the floor, but it uses water, and it's not fully water. It's some kind of liquid mixture. I don't know exactly, but I'm a big fan of those. It's great for air quality purposes, for comfort of the occupants, and it doesn't have the electric field on it. So if you can do that, that's awesome.
That's great. Yeah, thank you. Are those systems are they made specifically with non-conductive piping, or does it matter?
Yes. I think they use PVC piping, okay. Or I'm sure there's different options for that, but yes, you do not want the metal piping.
Harriet asks, I just see this pop up in the chat, is this being recorded? The answer is yes. And as soon as the webinar is over, it'll process the recording and you'll get it in email. So I don't know if this is a question that really has an answer, but I figured it might give you a chance to share your opinions on this. Mary asks, why don't we ask appliance manufacturers to remove Wi-Fi options from washers, dryers, stoves? Who uses them? And I think it was on an earlier webinar that you did for us that you were talking about, if I'm not mistaken, it was a Wi-Fi enabled tampon. Yeah. And so, yeah, I mean, what, maybe you just want to share your opinions, or maybe you actually have some action items for Mary and anyone else in the room who agrees.
I am 100% in alignment with Mary on this one. We should be asking them not to, to make these devices without those things in them. We absolutely should be, because you're right. I know people that have them and they're like, well, I don't know, it's supposed to connect to my phone or something. I mean, they're clearly not using them. I don't know who needs to start their washing machine when they're on the way home from the office or whatever. Yeah, it's ridiculous. We should be asking. We should all be asking so that they know that there is consumer demand for options without them. Absolutely. Let's start a revolution, Mary.
Excellent. Thank you. Now, Robert asks, can you still buy regular incandescent bulbs? And the answer to that is yes, you can. But I thought it would be they might not be as easy to find, but they definitely still exist. But I thought this would be a good opportunity to ask you, are there any low power consumption illumination options that aren't don't represent an increased EMF health risk?
Yes, there is one LED light bulb, and you're gonna have to forgive me because I don't know the name of it off the top of my head. But they use it in like emergency, like operating rooms, or in areas where there's a lot of sensitive equipment, because they don't want the EMI, the interference. I don't know how expensive they are, and I have a colleague that knows. I would have to ask, because I heard him mention it once in passing that, operating rooms and those kinds of things use these really specific LED light bulbs. I don't know that they're necessarily you can get them readily. And there is actually, I have another colleague that has measured a few Philips LED light bulbs that gave off pretty low readings as well, but I don't know the model off the top of my head. So that would take a little bit of experimenting. I would get one of the meters, one of the green wave or the gram sensor meters, and try a couple different options and measure, and that'll give you your answer.
Thank you. That was great. I lost the question. I was scrolling. Here we go. From Andrew. And I'm going to dive in with a quick answer here, but I'd like to hear your opinion too. Andrew asks, what is the best product to use to shield from the cell phone while using it? And so here, I have a cell phone here, right? So first off, I always tell people never to hold it up to their heads, because there are some EMF protection like phone cases that say it makes it safer to hold it up to your head. I always tell people not to do that, even with an EMF protection case. That's one reason SYB doesn't make a case. So you always want to use a headset, preferably an anti-radiation headset or speakerphone, or just text. Now, so let's say you're texting. How do you make it safer to text? Well, you can't do that, because as of right now, because what you need to do is shield the front of the phone, the part that's facing you. And as of right now, there are no shielding materials that are both clear and would allow the conductivity to work for the touchscreen to work. So there's no shielding option available. And I've looked into this. I mean, maybe there's one I haven't found, but I've done a lot of looking into this. There's no shielding material that you can use to cover the front of your phone and still have the screen work. So that's my answer there. But Cathy, I was wondering what you have thoughts about how to protect yourself from the phone while using it.
Yeah, I would agree with everything that you just said. Distance, again, air tube headset, if you're going to be talking on it, and as far away that you can have it from your body as possible if you have to use it. And using it, you can connect to your Wi-Fi via an Ethernet port if you want to do that too.
Thank you. So we are, I'm already getting the red countdown timer here. So we are running out of time. So with that, I am going to, as host's discretion here, I'm going to answer one more question. I'm going to answer it myself. Mary asks, how do you keep your cat from eating your wires?
Oh, I have an answer.
Oh, it's apple cider vinegar, isn't it?
Well, sure. But my cats eat my cords all the time. And this is what I did. So even the apple cider vinegar and the sprays did not work for me. I wrapped the entire things in bubble wrap, and I've had it on there for a year, and it's worked. It's worked really well.
So bubble wrap did it?
Bubble wrap did it.
Here
The
you
apple
go,
cider
Mary.
vinegar didn't work, but bubble wrap is beautiful.
Well,
yeah.
I don't know if Mary asked that question seriously or in jest, but she got a real answer. So that's great. So we're now, we're about a minute running out of time here. So I want to above all, thank Cathy. Thank you for donating your time to help educate people about these issues. I thought it was a fantastic session. Everyone who's in the room, you'll get a link to this recording pretty shortly as soon as it's complete on the server. And a quick reminder that these 2 discounts are they're valid today only until midnight tonight Pacific time. So if you agree that Cathy is super knowledgeable about these issues, and if you have questions maybe that we didn't get to, or maybe too specific to ask in a webinar, you can book time with Cathy for a video session on Zoom. She can do a deep dive into your specific questions, get you the answers you want, and you'll get the recording. So just enter answers20 at checkout. And the short link is shieldyourbody.com/consult. But you can just go to my website, shieldyourbody.com, and click on consulting. It's in the top nav. And if you're interested in any of my other EMF protection products, there's a 15% discount code. Just enter homework15 at checkout. It was called homework because this was about working from home. I thought that isn't as funny as I thought it was. But so these discounts work until midnight tonight Pacific time. So you got a few more hours to take advantage of these. And if you're watching this on the recording, these codes will not work. So, but everyone, thank you so much for taking the time. There's still so many of you here in the room. So not only showing up, but staying. And stay tuned. We'll have we'll have another webinar coming up in December. And we have Black Friday deals, Cyber Monday deals, everything starting pretty soon. So, so just stay. We have a lot, and I actually have a couple more products to launch this year too. So everyone, you can look forward to all of that. And thank you again. And we are now out of time. So everyone have a great evening. Stay safe, stay healthy. I'll be in touch soon. Bye.
Bye, everybody.